I want to try to explain something today which is not easy to explain, so please bear with me. So this is not really a conventional guided meditation, but nor is it just philosophical thinking. It's a kind of philosophical meditation whose purpose is not just to generate interesting ideas, but is to dissolve the mind in understanding. So the Vedantins and Sanskrit scholars amongst you will recognize what I am saying as an explanation of two doctrines that we find in classical Advaita, namely Ajātivāda and Vivartavada. Ajātivāda is the very, very highest non-dual understanding, and it is very rarely spoken of. There are hints of it in a few, in some traditional literature. And Ajātivāda is simply this, the idea that there is no creation, no world, no universe, that nothing exists. And I'm afraid it's even worse than that. There is not even the appearance of a world from this point of view. So this seems to conflict so profoundly with our experience that it is considered too profound even to speak of. So what is traditionally referred to as Vivartavada takes one step down, and this is already an extremely high understanding, namely that there is no world or universe as it appears to be, a multiplicity and diversity of objects made out of matter. But there is at least the appearance of such a world. In other words, the world is an illusion. An illusion is not something that is not real. It is something that is real, but is not what it appears to be. The landscape in a movie is an illusion, but the screen is, relatively speaking, its reality. The mirage in the desert is an illusion as water, but real, relatively speaking, as light. So in this second understanding of Vivartavada, the world is considered an illusion. That is, it is real, but it is not what it appears to be. What is it really? The one infinite, indivisible whole or reality made out of consciousness, love or spirit. It just appears to us the way it does because we view it through the lens of perception. And this is the level on which most of the highest non-dual teachings are given, from this perspective that the world is an illusion. As I say, even one step higher than that, and this is rarely spoken of, we get hints of it in the Mandukya Upanishad, Gaudapada's Karika. Occasionally Ramana Maharshi refers to it, and there are hints of it in Meister Eckhart. But it is considered so far removed from our experience that it is rarely mentioned. So I want to try and say something about this ultimate point of view, to try to somehow bring it into our experience, so that it's not just some abstract philosophical idea that is beyond our comprehension. And in order to do so, I'm going to use a very well-known colloquial English phrase that all the native English speakers will know, and many of you for whom English is a second language will know. It's a very common phrase. Namely, you cannot have your cake and eat it. Now you might be surprised to learn that this phrase contains within, is concealed within it, is the highest non-dual understanding. So, just in case the meaning of the phrase isn't clear to you, you cannot have your cake and eat it. If you have your cake, if your cake is in your hand, you have your cake, but you have not yet eaten it. However, when you eat your cake, you no longer have it in your hand. The cake has been incorporated into your body. In other words, it is no longer a piece of cake. So you either have the cake or you eat it. You can't have both. So exactly the same is true of our experience. We either know something or we are that thing. We cannot know something and be something at the same time. I'm going to say that again. We cannot know something and be that thing at the same time. In order to know something, we must stand apart from that thing as a separate subject of that thing, as the knower of that thing. Let me use another analogy. I hope I'm not making this more complicated by bringing in another analogy. Take the experience of seeing, physical seeing. We can only see something that is at a distance from our eyes. The only thing we cannot actually see are our eyes. Because in order to see something, and I'm just talking about seeing in a conventional sense now, in order to see a tree, we must stand at a distance from the tree. We must view it from a separate point of view. The closer an object comes to our eyes, the less easy it is to see it. And when the object touches our eyes, we can no longer see it as an object. We can only see something that is at a distance from our eyes. Now translate that into our experience. We can only know something as a thing that is at a distance from ourself, the knower. And it is for this reason that all experience takes place in subject-object relationship. When we say, I perceive the tree stands at a distance from ourself, the knower. Now, most of us, not here, but most people believe that the knower of our experience is the body-mind. But we, of course, here understand that the body and mind, that is the physical body, if for the moment we credit the physical body as with its own existence, that the physical body is known by us. We see it, hear it, touch it, taste it, smell it, and so on. So, and likewise the mind, thoughts, images, feelings, memories, ideas, these are known by us. I feel my body. I know my thoughts. So in this understanding, we understand that the body-mind, or the collection of thoughts, images, feelings, sensations that constitute our experience of the mind and body, are known by us. And the reason we can know the mind and the body is because we stand apart from them as the knower of them. And this is, of course, enshrined in our language. I know my thoughts. The subject knows the object. Now, in just the same way that we cannot have our cake and eat it, because when we eat it, the cake disappears as such into ourself. Ourself in this case is the body. So in exactly the same way, we cannot know in subject-object relationship what we are, because we are too close to ourself to be able to know ourself in subject-object relationship. We can only know something that is at a distance from ourself, and that is other than ourself. And that is why when we go deeply into our experience of ourself, first of all we know the experience of the world, then we come a bit closer, we know the experience of our body, we come a bit closer, we know our feelings, we know our thoughts, we know our breath, we come closer and closer and closer, and there, right at the very heart of our experience, where our self stands, there is this emptiness. It is our self. It is that which knows. It is that which I am. But we can never find it, or it can never find itself. And therefore, in relation to the objects that we normally know, that is our thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions, it is not an object. It is empty. It is void. It is not a thing. Same reason that our eyes never appear to us as an object of our perception, so our self never appears to us as an object of our knowledge. We can never stand apart from ourself and know ourself as something. So with reference to the things that we normally know, our self is nothing, empty. And of course this recognition is for the separate self, that is, for the one who is identified with the content of experience, identified with the things that we know. This understanding is terrifying, because it is the death of that one. It is the death, or the seeming death, of the one that derives its identity from association with the things that it knows. And that is why there is sometimes so much resistance to practicing self-inquiry. How the mind cleverly conjures up all sorts of reasons why we shouldn't do so, in order to avoid this plunge into emptiness, which feels like a death from the perspective of the separate self, but is in fact the rebirth of ourself as we essentially are. Of course, from the perspective, if we can call it a perspective, of the one that we truly are, we are not really nothing. It is only the mind that says we are nothing, because the mind tries to formulate what we essentially are with reference to the things that it normally knows. And the mind says what we essentially are is none of those things, hence nothing. So from the mind's point of view, what we are is nothing. But from its own point of view, it is neither something nor nothing. It simply doesn't experience itself with reference to objects. The mind simply cannot formulate what our self's experience of itself is. And hence the mind falls silent here. When I speak of our self's experience of itself, I don't mean to imply that our self, our essential self, knows itself in subject-object, knows itself in subject-object relationship. It knows itself just by being itself. Its being of itself is its knowing of itself. Its knowledge of itself is absolute knowledge. That is knowledge that is not mediated through the mind. And yet it shines in the mind as the knowledge I am. Now this empty, aware being that stands at the center of our experience, that is ourself, it's like the space in this room. It is not really, just as the space in this room is not really in this room, but is the same unlimited space as the space of the universe. So this empty, aware being that stands at the heart of ourself is not really contained in, the body-mind. It is the same infinite being that underlies and appears as the world, the universe. So at this stage we are admitting that the one infinite being that stands at the very center of ourself and shines in us as the knowledge I am is the same infinite being that appears to us through our sense perceptions as the universe. But it only appears as a universe from our limited and localized perspective. The universe only appears as such when viewed from a point of view, when viewed from the point of view of the finite mind through the lens of sense perception. If we were to ask ourselves the question, but what is if the universe is an appearance of the one infinite reality, empty, aware being that shines in us as the knowledge I am, then what is its experience? If the one infinite reality, infinite aware being, God's being, is that which truly is, the only thing, which is of course not a thing, that truly is, then we must sometime come to the question, but what is its experience of itself? Not how do we view it from the localized perspective of a finite mind. We know that from the localized perspective of a finite mind, the one infinite reality appears as the universe, a multiplicity and diversity of objects. But what is ultimately real can only be reality's knowledge of itself. Reality's view of itself, not the partial view from the perspective of a finite mind, but its knowledge of itself. So, what is infinite consciousness's experience of itself? Or, in religious terms, what is God's experience of itself? As we discovered earlier, in order to know something, one must stand apart from that thing and know it from a localized perspective in subject-object relationship. That is why we know the universe from the localized perspective of our body. But what is God's experience? And if God alone truly is, if infinite consciousness alone truly is, then that experience is all that really matters, is all that is truly real. So what is infinite consciousness's experience of itself? Infinite consciousness's experience of itself is identical to our experience of ourself. And as we saw earlier, if we go deeply into our experience of ourself, we find this aware emptiness at the heart of ourself. Everything that we know is not ourself. We know it in subject-object relationship. We are too close to ourselves to know ourselves as an object. Therefore, there is no objective knowledge in our knowledge of ourselves. Just aware emptiness. Aware, empty being. And that is identical to infinite consciousness's knowledge of itself. In fact, our knowledge of ourself is infinite consciousness's knowledge of itself. Consciousness cannot stand apart from itself and look back at itself and know itself in subject-object relationship. It knows itself just by being itself. Infinite consciousness does not even know that it is infinite consciousness. Because in order to do so, you even conceive of infinite consciousness, we must stand apart from it. Consciousness does not know that it is consciousness. God does not know that it is God. We do not know that we are a self. Our knowledge of ourself, God's knowledge of itself, consciousness's knowledge of itself is the same knowledge in which there is no knowledge, just the shining of aware being without any subject or object. In other words, infinite consciousness knows nothing but is everything. Infinite consciousness has no knowledge. It knows nothing of the world. It knows nothing of creation. It knows nothing of a universe. It knows nothing, because in order to know something, we must stand apart from that thing. And infinite consciousness cannot stand apart from itself, because there is nowhere other than itself where it could stand. Consciousness knows nothing, but is everything, at least is what the finite mind conceives as everything. All things, although there are no things for consciousness, there is no everything for consciousness. The statement consciousness is everything is a concession to the mind's belief in things. Okay. The mind believes there are things. Consciousness is all of those things. But in its own experience of itself, it knows nothing of things, because it cannot stand apart from itself. It cannot stand apart from a thing and know itself, and know that thing. It can only be that thing. Consciousness does not know the universe, but it is the universe. So in its own experience of itself, and it is the only one that truly is, there is nothing. It is only from our point of view, from the localized point of view of a finite mind, that aware emptiness that is the nature of consciousness or God's being appears as a universe, and therefore as a concession to that belief we say consciousness is the universe. Consciousness is the universe, or the universe is made only of consciousness, or is an appearance of consciousness, is really the top of the mountain. But here we've taken off from the mountain. In consciousness's view, there is no universe for it to be the all of. There is just itself. And this, please don't misunderstand me, this is not a nihilistic philosophy that is denying the very real universe that we inhabit. We are upgrading, uplifting, sanctifying the universe Meister Eckhart said, if I am either this or that, I cannot be all things. In other words, to be all things, we must first become nothing. We must know ourselves as nothing in order to be everything. And what is, in our human experience, what is the experience of being another thing? Being so identified with the other thing or the other person that we feel we are that thing or that person. That's what love is. We enter so fully into the other that we feel we are the other. Our identities merge. That's the experience we call love. But we cannot have that experience as a person, because as a person we stand apart from the other. So to love, we must become nothing. We must be nothing in order to love, in order to be everything. We must know ourselves as nothing. Only as such can we be the other. That is, can we love. In other words, in order to love another, one must become nothing. It is only as nothing that one can become the other. Of course, when we don't become, but as we recognize ourselves as nothing, no thing, the other ceases to be other, of course. But relatively speaking, we either know the other or we are the other. To know them, we have to stand apart from them. But to be them, we no longer know them, we are them. And love is not an experience that a person has, it is the end of the person we seem to be. And for the same reason, and there's not many places that it is possible to say this, but for the same reason, from the very highest point of view, God does not love the world. God does not love each of us as individuals. God knows nothing of the world. God knows nothing of us as individuals, because in order to do so, God would have to separate itself from us and know us from a distance. And to do so, God would have to be finite, and then God would not be God. However, this understanding is too radical for most people, so most teachings take one step down. They come back onto the top of the mountain, and acknowledging the existence of the individual says that God loves each of us unconditionally. And that is true from that perspective. We develop a personal relationship with the infinite. That is a legitimate position. It is the highest state of the individual. But ultimately it is not true. That's why Meister Eckhart prayed to God to rid him of God. He prayed to God to cease being the God that knew him as a separate person. In other words, he prayed to God to take him, Meister Eckhart, so fully into himself, into God's being, that he no longer stood as a person and God no longer stood as God. What was considered the ultimate blasphemy was in fact the ultimate truth. In order to know creation, or even the appearance of creation, one must stand as a finite mind, as a localized point of view. It is only from that view that either creation itself or the appearance of creation can exist or seem to exist. But from the point of view of the infinite, which is of course not a point of view, in the experience of the infinite, in God's experience, there can be no knowledge of creation or even the appearance of creation, because it cannot stand apart from itself. God knows nothing, but is what the mind calls everything. That is the experience of love. To know a thing by being that thing. It is only possible to know what is not. It is only possible to be what is. What I have tried to do this morning is to reconcile the very highest non-dual understanding with our human experience, to reconcile the divine with the human, the transcendent with the immanent, and to show, hopefully not just intellectually but experientially, that the very highest understanding, there is no creation, there is no universe, there is not even the appearance of such a creation. shines in our human experience as love. We cannot know somebody and love them. To know someone, we must stand apart from them. And if we stand apart from them, we cannot know them as they truly are. Because we are not knowing ourselves as we truly are. To know them truly is to cease knowing them as a person. To be them is to know them. The only way to know anything as it is to be that thing. And if we are that thing ceases to be a thing, ceases to be a person, stands revealed as the infinite. That is the experience of love.